So to show you what's on my mat and the things that you need to make the hair slide, you will need some beads, and the beads that you want to use for this are quite small. You don't want to use anything too chunky. You want it to sort of sit in the hair. So if you've got some of these small beads lying around, these would be perfect. You can get boxes of this quite easily, so if you wanted to get some you could. If you've got old craft sets that have got some beads in, have a look and see what you've got. If you haven't, but you'd like to have a go at this anyway, and you happen to have some hammer beads lying around, they will work. They won't look quite as good, they won't stick together quite as nicely, but you can still make them with this. It will still work. So if you've got some hammer beads, you can use those. You're going to need some thread of some sort, and it needs to be small enough, thin enough to go through the beads that you're using, obviously, and you need to be able to thread the beads onto this, but it doesn't need to be massively thick. So if you've got some thread, then use that. If you need to, you could probably do it using just some normal sewing thread, although you'll need to knot it in a slightly different way, I think, at the end. But you could use that if you wanted to. Some scissors, obviously, to cut your thread, and then obviously you're going to need a hair slide to attach it to. So I've just got one of these really basic metal hair slides here. You know, if you've got one that's got something on it already, it's already decorated, as long as you can get the thread through into the middle bit, it should still work. So you could use those. So it's pretty simple. There's nothing particularly complicated. It can be a bit fiddly to start with, but just cut off some thread. Up to you how long you want it to be. Really doesn't matter. Just cut off some. If you want it to be nice and long, if you've got long hair, or if your children have got long hair, then you might want it to be a bit longer. It's up to you. So cut off a piece of thread, and all you need to do is sort of get the middle of the thread and slide that down the center prong of your clip. If you can see that. So it's just through the center, and you literally just wrap it around that middle prong. So both strands, you want to wrap around the middle prong, like so. So it looks like that. And then just do a couple of knots there just to stop it from coming away. So I'm just going to go down to my mat and do the knots. I'm going to close it because it'll be easy for me to handle, and then I'm just going to do some knots. Just really simple granny knots, nothing special about this, just a bit fiddly. Okay, so there's one knot, and then my second knot. And then all they need to do is decide on their pattern. So you've got two strands coming out of the back. So when that's in their hair and they've got beads on, they will come out of the back like that. So they just need to decide on what their pattern is, and it can be anything. So I'm just going to choose some beads from here. And I'm going to do some of these blue, and then maybe some of this nice bright pink. Oh, I've got a silver in there, I'll put that back. And I'm just going to literally thread them on. So just one by one, and I'm going to do myself alternative colours for my pattern. So I'm just threading my beads on one by one. And these beads are all different sizes and shapes, and actually I think that looks quite pretty on these. I think it gives it a bit more interest and texture. Oops, I've put the wrong colour on. I'm not paying attention, I put the wrong colour on. So yeah, and I think the problem with the hammer beads is that they're so uniform that it looks a bit rigid, but you can still do it with the hammer beads. It's still a nice threading exercise for the kids to do. So just thread them on, and then you need to just make sure that you've got enough space at the bottom to do knots, because you're going to need to do knots big enough that the beads don't fall over the top. So make sure there's plenty of space. A few more here for those knots. Okay, so that's what I've done. I've just added some beads, and as you can see, when they're attached, they're going to come out the back. I'm going to leave that there and just show you. So I'm just going to do some knots. Now, it doesn't matter if you've got a bit of a gap, because actually that will help them fall. Okay, so when you do your knot, don't worry about getting it right up close to that bead. And again, just do some knots and make sure that the final size of those knots is big enough that the beads are not just going to slide straight over the top. So I'm definitely going to need to do at least 2 with this one, and then we'll see. And I'll try and get them to sit together. So I'm just trying to get my knots to sit on top of each other. Okay, now, and that actually I think is enough on this. I think that's going to stop them. So there's my first row. Okay, so I'm going to do a different colour for my second row. So I think I might use this time yellow. I think I might use this turquoisey blue. I think that might look quite pretty together. So in the same way, I'm just going to string some on. So on it goes. So blue and then yellow in the same. I'm just going to do mine alternative, and as I say, you can do whatever. The kids can choose whatever design they want to do, and sometimes it's quite nice to get them to do their design, their patterns first, get them to think about that first before they actually start threading. But some kids just like to go for it, whichever. Also, just to say to you, I'm using this is a bead mat, and it stops the beads falling around, and that's what I use when I'm doing my beading. If you won't have one of these, or you may have one of these, but you probably don't. Just use something fleecy. If you've got a fleece blanket or a fleece jumper, anything that will just stop those beads from flying all over the place will just help a little bit, rather than just being straight on the table where they might skid along a bit. So yeah, anything really that will just hold those beads in place. You don't need to have a specialist bead mat like this. So here we go. So a few more on here. Okay. Another yellow. Okay. So I've got a few. I'm going to finish with one more, I think, and then I'm going to do my knot on the other end. So here we go again. So again, as I say, don't worry about getting that knot right up close to the bead. Try and get it not too far away, but don't worry about getting it too close. And then we just do some overhand normal granny knots. Push that knot down with my fingers before I fix it. Okay, one more to go over the top of that. Make sure they sit on top of each other. Okay, let's see if it works, and it does. So there's my 2 strands, and then you'd probably want to do it a bit longer than that. I haven't done very many. You can obviously go a lot longer than that. And then just to finish off, you'd literally just trim the ends off. And 2, and that's it. And there is